You're listening to Choose Views with Richard Chu on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Hey guys, welcome back to Choose Views. 773-763-9278. Gotten some great text messages. Let me just do a couple quick house cleaning items. We've got potentially two other guests that will be with us this morning, and we may just kind of merge them together to kind of eliminate some of the issues. Thanks to Nathan for being with us, and whatever was happening from a technological standpoint, we will have him back on because I want to have his comment, his experience and observation in the education field and the work that he's doing out in New England is important. And so we'll definitely have him back, hopefully sooner than later. Now, it's possible that we'll have... Greg, are you there?
Yes, Greg is here.
Hey,
Greg
good
Palast.
morning. Hey, Greg, listen, it's been a wonky, wacky morning with technology. So we may, hopefully your signal won't be in and out, but we'll do our best to kind of plow ourselves through it. And we may be joined by another person that we were supposed to have on earlier, but we'll fit them in. Someone that you'll probably appreciate having as part of the call. He's a disaster survival expert in terms of how to deal with some of this crazy weather patterns that we're having. But hey guys, one of our lifelong, friends in the conversation, Greg Palast, is with us this morning. And as you guys know, Greg has been on WCPT before and certainly been here on Choose Views before. And Greg hits it right on the screws, to use a golf terminology, when it comes to talking about voter suppression. And when we had Greg with us before, we talked about his latest production, Vigilante, which has just been phenomenal in the exposure of voter fraud and the people that are out there trying to hunt down this process. And Greg, talk a little bit about where you are in this conversation around Trump lost, voter suppression won in this most recent election. I've had a couple people that have sent me text messages already this morning anticipating you being on. So tell us what your numbers are showing. Tell us what the data is showing in this conversation.
Okay, Richard. Can you hear me, Richard? I just want to make sure.
You can hear you great. You sound fantastic.
Okay, then get ready for this. Take out your pencils. Take out your calculators. No, you don't have to do that. Go to gregpalast.com, and you can read the article, Trump lost, vote suppression won. Here are the numbers. For those who don't know Greg Palast, I'm an investigative reporter for 25 years for The Guardian, BBC Television, and Rolling Stone. I've been on the vote suppression beat. And vote suppression, by the way, is a very fancy term for shafting black people out of their vote. And before I was an investigative reporter, I was a forensic economist. In fact, I believe it or not, I studied under Milton Friedman at the University of Chicago, and that's where I got my degree. And I taught statistics at Indiana U in Gary. And so and then I became an expert for the Justice Department on these issues. I'm a numbers guy. Here are the numbers. That's what you want, Richard. You won't like to hear this, but here's the truth. With a very careful calculations, that's why it took me a couple of months. Vote suppression stole 3,565,000 votes, 3.5 million votes from Kamala Harris's total. And that would have won her also, by the way, looking into the numbers, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia. If not for shafting people of color out of their vote, and I'll go through some of the numbers, how that happens, Kamala Harris would have won this thing with 286 electoral votes. But Jim Crow is alive and well in too much of America these days. So, for example, and this is not from Greg Palast's head. I didn't have a dream about this. I get these numbers from what's called the United States Elections Assistance Commission. We actually have an agency which not only counts the votes in America, but counts the non-votes in America. Here's America's nasty little secret, Richard. We don't count all the votes. We don't let everyone vote, in particular voters of color. So here's some of the numbers. This is the federal government official figures hidden in plain sight. The last election before the 2024 election, 4,776,000 98,706 voters, to be exact. So almost 5 million voters were purged from the voter rolls without evidence. Now, when I say purged, that means that Richard Chu's name has been taken off the voter rolls in Chicago. Now, if it were anyone's vote, it wouldn't matter if it were random. It's not. I went through, and if it were legit, hey, people who are illegal voters shouldn't be on the voter rolls, Richard. But for the ACLU of Georgia and Black Voters Matter Fund, I don't know if the great Latasha Brown, I did a technical legal report, and also this is for the Reverend Jesse Jackson Rainbow Push, the technical report on Georgia, and we found 198,000 names of people who were told that they couldn't vote because they had moved from Georgia or Atlanta. And in fact, every single one of those 198,000 people were legal voters, overwhelmingly African American. There was also some young voters, in other words, voters of color, their color being blue. And we're not guessing. I used the experts from Amazon and Microsoft to work with me, and we went through name by name by name. And it's not just names, Richard. I was at the polling station in Atlanta when, if you watch my film, which you can get at gregpalast.com, by the way, for gratis, you will see a young woman in tears because her grandmother, 92 years old, and I have her on camera, her name's Christine Jordan, voting at the same station in Atlanta for 50 years. And in the last election, they simply threw her out. This 98-year-old woman said she didn't live there anymore. I went to her house, and I know that she still lives there because it was down the street, and there on the wall was a picture of her cousin having dinner with her 50 years earlier, Martin Luther King. This is Martin Luther King's cousin. They knocked her off. We had 2,100,000 mail-in ballots disqualified. People, according to NPR, of all places, 1 in 7 mail-in ballots are thrown in the garbage. It's very easy to reject a mail-in ballot. Now, whose mail-in ballots? The state of Washington, Richard, did a study and found that if you are black, you're 400% more likely to have your mail-in ballot rejected. And that's in the state of Washington, which has the least vote suppression of any of the 50 states. Can you imagine what it is in Georgia? So it's 4-1 black to white disqualifications of mail-in ballots.
Some people have said this is one of those things. Some people have said to me, Greg, and again, this is data versus people's just opinion. How do they know that a mail-in ballot, Richard, is a black voter?
Oh, it's very easy. First of all, in a lot of states like Georgia, it says BLA next to your name in the registration. They're not guessing. They also know if you're Democrat.
So it's after it's received versus prior to. Before, I did that as a I know the answer question, but I wanted you to give the answer. Say that again, Greg.
So in a lot of states, like in the South, especially in Georgia, Florida, and Mississippi, Alabama, it says BLA next to your name if you're black. Now, the other, thing is that they know for your zip code. Everyone kind of votes like their neighbors. They know when it's an African-American neighborhood. In fact, for example, and they work by statistics. In fact, my number 3,565,000 takes in the fact that they do capture Trump voters in there. They do capture Republicans. They do capture people who wouldn't vote. And there's a few people in there who actually have moved, et cetera. But I took all those people out, like the dead, the people who actually moved, the Trump voters, et cetera. But I actually mapped, with the Washington Post, by the way, I did a map of the purge for Black Voters Matter in Wisconsin. Almost every single purged voter was a black voter in Milwaukee. That was the overwhelming majority. And then a large contingent of students in Madison, Wisconsin. And as you know, the students in Madison weren't exactly Trump voters. So they know who they're going after exactly. And again, and then that's just, now I just talked about purges, mail-in ballots, spoiled ballots. That's where you vote in precinct and your ballot's thrown out. Now here's another number. According to the U.S. Civil Rights Commission, the chance your ballot will be rejected that you've cast for some technical reason, whether it's mail-in or in precinct, like they couldn't read the ballot or something like that, or it got kicked out. The chance your ballot will be rejected is 9 900% higher if you're black than if you're white. Again, this is not Greg Palast. I'm using the government figures. 900%, your chance is 9 times more to lose your ballot through a rejection. And it's not small. I said 2.1 million mail-in ballots rejected, 585,000 in precinct, gets over 500,000 votes in precinct. And then there's something called provisional ballots. Now, so if you're purged or that they can't find your ballot, they say, don't worry about it. The little old lady behind the desk says, just fill out this ballot, just fill out this paper ballot, stick it in an envelope, fill that out, and they'll check it later and count it. Oh, no, they won't. I call them placebo ballots because according to the federal government, once again, this is not me, it's federal government, I'm using their stats, 42% of all provisional ballots are rejected. In places like Georgia, you have to go into your county voting office and show them new ID to get your ballot. Now, if it were random, who cares? But it's not random. If you're black, Hispanic, or Latino, the chance you will be handed a provisional ballot is 300% higher than if you're white. Again, these are government stats. Now, what happened in this election? And then there's one other horrible thing, that brand new Jim Crow tactic that was the ultimate thing that bent this election. These are vigilante challenges. Now, for the first time since 1946, when the Ku Klux Klan used this method, the Trump campaign picked up the Ku Klux Klan plan of 1946, in which individuals challenge another voter's right to have their ballot counted. Now, and what does this mean? It says that in about at least 20 states still have Jim Crow laws on their books, which say that Greg Palast can challenge Richard Chew and say, don't count Richard's ballot, don't send him a ballot, because Richard doesn't live in Chicago. Now, who is Greg Palast to say Richard doesn't live in Chicago, doesn't live in Illinois? I'm just some political hack. We had, are you ready for this? The group True the Vote signed up 40,000 volunteers to challenge voters. And this old Ku Klux Klan thing of an individual challenging a voter, and it works in 20 states. And
how many? Hey, Greg. So this is the question that pops into my mind, and I wrote this down. How many of those states, of those 20, did that apply? Or I'm sorry, how many of those were the quote unquote battleground / swing states where that happened? What's the overlay of that?
Pennsylvania and Georgia were absolutely spun by this mass challenge. It's one of the big vigilante challengers. Now, let me give you some numbers here. It's pretty horrible. The group True the Vote, the main Trump front group, which is mounting the challenges, by the beginning of August, it challenged 317,886 people. That's a third of a million people. Their goal, announced goal, that's what they themselves admitted. Then they when I caught that number, they took it off their website. But their goal was 2 million. In fact, you'll see my producer, Martin Sheen, at the beginning of the film Vigilantes, Inc. He explains that they are on their way to challenging 2 million. Cleta Mitchell, who's Trump's lawyer, mounted challenges in Philadelphia. Who lives there? And her group called Eagle AI was challenging tens of thousands of people with a goal of 250,000 challenges. Now, what does this mean? Let me tell you how it breaks down. We called 800 of the challenged people. We did a big sample, a big statistically relevant sample, because I am a statistician. And those 800 people, overwhelmingly African Americans who were challenged by these organizations. What's the basis of the challenge? That black people stuff ballot boxes, black people stuff drop boxes, and this is the group that created this hysteria with this film 2,000 Mules, calling all these black men. They claimed that tens of thousands of black men were paid $10 a piece to stuff in extra ballots into ballot drop boxes in Philadelphia and in Atlanta and in Arizona and Phoenix. Those are Latinos who were supposedly stuffing ballot boxes. By the way, the group was sued because every person that they showed supposedly stuffing in a ballot was a legal voter, and they've been sued into a fare thee well. But it doesn't matter. Donald Trump took the oath of office based on these challenges. One challenge one challenge. I was with Major Gamaliel Turner. Now, this is one of the Pentagon's top experts on warfare of the future. He was creating new weapons for Ukraine, and he was sent by the president from his base at Fort Benning, Georgia, to California, and they took away. His vote was challenged not by a government official, but by the chairman of the Republican Party in southern Georgia.
And that's
an African. By the way, I should say we're on radio. General Turner is. If you go to gregpalast.com and read my article, you will see he's definitely very African American.
He's a guy. He's a guy that was in. That's actually part of the documentary and Vigilantes. Is that right? So, yes. Greg, we're going to take a quick break. When I come back, I want to talk about technology in this space of voter suppression and the issue with vote counts. But let's take a quick break. When we come back, I want to ask you a question in that space. The number is 773-763-9278. Guys, we got Greg Palast with us this morning talking about voter suppression, the 2024 election, and how we go forward. This is Choose Views, and we'll be right back.
You're listening to Choose Views with Richard Chu on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Hey guys, welcome back to Choose Views, 773-763-9278. This is Richard Chu. I've got Greg Palast with us today talking about voter suppression in one breath, but also the bigger conversation around how we go forward and what we do to make this right. Greg, I have a question regarding technology, and I keep coming back to this thing that took place during the campaign where Trump said during some speech or some campaign event, you're never going to have to vote again. You don't have to vote. We're going to, take care of it, whatever the wording exactly was. And then the other thing that most recently came out where he was applauding or praising Elon, knowing the numbers and knowing the votes and this, that, and the other. And then, of course, that election night thing that 4 hours before the election, Musk knew the outcome in certain states. Okay. That's a lot of stuff I just threw at you, but I know that you pay attention to it because it's one of your areas of knowledge, deep knowledge. Can you talk about those three things, which is all the same thing, which is something funky with the voting, and how technology and Musk may have had something to do with it? A lot of speculation was out there. I hadn't leaned into it too much, but I want to kind of see if there's a nexus here.
Well, two things. If you think that Elon Musk controlled the vote count from outer space, it didn't happen. I checked it out. But I looked at it carefully. That's not what's happening. In fact, I'm not trying to be racist about this because my parents are white, but it's always white guys who come up with this theory, and because it challenges their vote. What I find with racial suppression, the 3,565,000 votes, which were taken away, which should have been for Harris, which would have given her a popular vote victory of 1.2 million, that is completely accounted for by vote suppression. So we don't need to add in any fancy Hollywood stuff about Musk. Now, when Trump says these things, just so you know, the right wing, I've been to many Trump rallies. Our team goes undercover with these people. They call it owning the libs. We go into the white, the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers. We have our undercover people, and they call it owning the libs. So they like to troll us and say, oh, yeah, Elon had all the numbers. He fixed it for us. They like to drive us crazy with that stuff. But what we really have to worry about in going forward is the new explosion. In fact, when I talked about those challenges, Gerald Griggs, the president of the NAACP, said he was facing 200,000 challenges, these vigilante challenges in Georgia alone. 200,000 challenges in Georgia alone. And so we are talking, and again, tens of thousands in Philadelphia, massive purge of voters in Philadelphia without, which again, we go through these numbers name by name. We did it in Wisconsin. These are phony purge lists, and but again, aimed at voters of color. And what we really have to worry about when Trump says there won't be another election, because with the acceleration of the return of old Jim Crow tactics, the massive challenge of voters, the rejection of mail-in ballots, things like in Georgia, for example, which was key to Trump's so-called victory, is that you have the vast majority of African Americans in Georgia vote by mail in early or mainly by drop box. And so what they did was they shuttered the drop boxes. You had a 90% drop in drop box voting. And that's the way that most black people voted in Atlanta. And what they did was they decreased the number of drop boxes by 75% in black counties and increased the number of drop boxes in white counties. This is what steals elections away. And in fact, in Texas, where Rodney Ellis, the first black commissioner of Harris County, Texas, now that's Houston. Now, I don't know if many people know this, but Houston has the highest black population of any city in America.
Yep.
And they were going to mail out ballots, 2.5 million ballots to all the Houstonians for the election 4 years ago in 2020. And Ken Paxton, the Republican Attorney General of Texas, stopped it, and he proudly stopped the mailing of the ballots to Black Houston. And he said, and he got on Steve Bannon's podcast and said, if it weren't for stopping mail-in ballots out of Houston, Trump would have lost Texas. That's Texas. I'm not talking here about Arizona. I'm talking Texas. So the Republican Party itself had said, if it were not for our vote suppression campaign, Trump would have lost Texas. Now,
and alone the state elections that would have been equally impacted because it's Texas, and people could keep asking this question, Greg. How does Texas, with the shift, so to speak, the shift of the population that has taken place, how does Texas keep coming up red, not just in terms of the national election, but their state elected officials? And how does, someone like Colin Allred lose to Ted Cruz? And so, this is where, so first of all, let me press pause. Thank you for addressing the Elon Musk factor, as people have been trying to say, in terms of, that part of this. It's really a lot less sophisticated and in some ways organic from the Republican Party, and that is they're just doing some basic, simple things like removing voting drop boxes in one area and increasing them in another area. Yep. And that's going to not only the long term. I'm sorry, let me put it this way as we kind of wrap up, and we're going to talk about this some more in the weeks to come, because
sure.
The long term and short term impact of voter suppression is when people say my vote doesn't count. In some cases, it's not counting or being counted, but it's also the mental, psychological part of saying and seeing all the people work so doggone hard during the run up to an election, and then asking themselves, well, gosh, we did all this work and to no outcome to our benefit. There's a psychological part of voter suppression that takes place when votes don't get counted. Talk about that for a second.
Well, there's two ways. Some people can feel discouraged. Oh, they're not going to count my ballot. But I work a lot and very closely with the Reverend Jesse Jackson and his legal team and his political team to overturn these vote suppression tactics. So what we found, and what Stacey Abrams found in Georgia, is that when you tell people that they're trying to take away your vote, they're taking away your vote because no one steals your vote because it ain't worth anything. They steal your vote because it's really valuable. So you want
Black votes matter.
Exactly. Well, that's why. And I work with Latasha Brown, the founder of Black Voters Matter, who teaches at Harvard, and so I did some technical reports for her, and of course she appears in my movie Vigilantes Inc., which again you can download or stream for free at gregpalast.com. It's free. Thank you very much for support from Jamie Foxx and Leonardo DiCaprio. But what we found is that people get mad and the turnout rises. That's what happened in Georgia. That's how Joe Biden won in 2020, and Reverend Warnock and John Ossoff, two progressive senators, Warnock, African American, Ossoff, Jewish American, out of Georgia. And they won because these states, Texas, Georgia, Mississippi, these states, and Ohio, by the way, these states are all blue states if you let everyone vote. And they don't. But you can fight this, and this is what's important. So, for example, with Reverend Jackson, we launched a campaign against a horrendous vote suppression trick called interstate cross-check. That knocked out almost 1 million people in 2016. It's one of the main reasons Hillary Clinton supposedly lost. And so we ran this campaign and succeeded in getting this horrific Jim Crow program shut down. What they would do is they would say, Jack Johnson voted and Jose Hernandez voted in Atlanta, and there's also Jose Hernandez who voted in Houston and a Jack Johnson who voted in Houston. So obviously it's the same voter voting twice. Well, I'm sorry, Jose Hernandez is maybe a common name, maybe not for Republican, but this is the game that they were playing, and we got that system shut down. So you can overcome this. You can't win with 50% of the vote anymore. You got to win. The suppression factor is at least 2.3%. It may not sound like a lot, but that comes out to 3.5 million votes nationwide, and a lot of electoral votes. So we can beat the steal. We can suppress the suppressors and overcome them. Martin Luther King didn't say, we might overcome. We
shall overcome.
He says we shall overcome, because look, this march to the voting booth is not going to end. It's getting worse. And under Trump, I got to tell you, it's going to get worse. They're going to start passing national laws increasing this vigilante vote challenge business.
Well, just in California, and just in California, and when we have you back, which will be sooner than later, because I want to talk some more. We have to continue to talk about this, so we'll get this rescheduled to have you back again soon.
Sure.
And real quickly as we wrap up, to your point about voting and what the the Trump administration is going to try to do. Many people don't know this, but in California, they're trying to hold funding for emergency funding by making California acquiesce and say you're going to change your voting guidelines with regard to voter ID. And that is a form of voters. That's a scare tactic as well as voter suppression, right?
Well, I gotta tell you that it's personal. My office burnt down. I'm here in Chicago, by the way, now from California. So my office is ashes, and we cannot get relief. We cannot get relief until we change our voting laws to require, this photo ID business. And here, they haven't found one illegal voter in California. Just find me one, guys.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, so I'll see you at gregpalast.com. But this is horrific what's coming our way. But we shall overcome. It will swing back. Believe me.
Greg, we'll have you back on sooner than later. I'll reach out to you in the next few days, and we'll get this going again. Thanks for being with us this morning. Good to hear your voice. Stay safe, Greg.